Hi, Praggies, and welcome back to another episode of Pragmatic Optimists. I'm State Senator Tiara Mack, and I'm joined by Attorney Rachel Cohen. And we have to talk about the Supreme Court, which has officially ruled that racial gerrymandering is totally cool, totally gauche. It is in, it is hot, and we must all be doing it because Daddy Trump said, and even though several Republican and Trump-appointed district court judges said, "Hi, Texas, these maps, racial gerrymandering and illegal," the Supreme Court has decided to throw out all evidence to support the claim that racial gerrymandering was happening in Texas. And because Trump wants to rig the 2026 elections, and he's on a rampage through multiple states that have bent the knee to lick his boots, we now have the Supreme Court that has approved Texas maps that have been in the news for many, many months. And this is not only a expected but still devastating blow to the state of our democracy, but is a further indictment that this court, this current Roberts Supreme Court, is here to do the bidding of the GOP exclusively. It is only here to serve the whims of a Christian fascist leader who has determined that he can use all of his power in every single branch because the House has given over their power to be able to declare war and create budgets to Trump, and the judicial branch in the form of the Supreme Court has also given over all of their power to make discerning decisions about our Constitution and about the state of our democracy, also to Trump. And Rachel, I know that these maps have been in the news a lot. And there are multiple states, Ohio, Texas, Indiana has now joined in on also being pressured to change their maps. We know that there are several other Democratic-led states. I think North Carolina was the other Republican state. And we also have California, which passed their vote to also do mid-decade redistricting in order to put everyone's fingers on the scale to tilt it in their direction. And one of the things I thought was really funny in terms of this map is that Indiana Republicans were also recently in the news because Trump has threatened Republicans in that state that if they do not vote to introduce new mid-century maps, he will primary all of them. And so Republicans in Indiana have gotten pipe bomb threats. They have been threatened with swatting, and other businesses have been impacted. And these are Republicans in the GOP. One Republican, Senator Sue Glick, said, "This is exactly cheating." And so there are Republicans, especially in the middle of the country, who don't want to do illegal partisan and racial gerrymandering, but they are being pressured by the MAGA base and by MAGA supporters to do whatever Trump's bidding is. And as we continue to see these maps as we go into 2026, we won't get into the race that just happened in Tennessee with Afton Bain, who's one of our American Demands candidates. Though she did not win her race, she heavily swung her district in Tennessee that Trump won by a 2-digit margin in 2024 back to a pretty impressive lead for Democrats, which has been seen as a win and a call that the Democratic Party is doing really well and is going to likely be able to get some control of the House if we do not see these maps. So as we continue to see some of these stories about racial gerrymandering and maps, what are you seeing about the state of the elections in 2026 and how important it is for everyone to vote and every single person to know exactly what is at stake?
Couple of different threads here that I think are worth pulling on and kind of buckets that are worth diving into. The first is that this focus on racial gerrymandering kind of hides the reality that one of the biggest issues here is that we have allowed political or partisan gerrymandering as a legal structure in this country for a very long time. And so although racial gerrymandering has not been allowed, where you're drawing to try to dilute the voting power of particularly Black people in this country, one of the ways that racial gerrymandering has kind of been allowed anyway is that the argument that Texas made in its Supreme Court filings, which is that this is a political or partisan gerrymander. And even when we were enforcing long-standing rules and laws and legal interpretations about the illegality of diluting the Black vote, there were plenty of maps that could still be upheld as partisan or politically drawn because they were drawn around Democrats in highly Black districts, right? And so, number one, I think that something that we're always trying to get our viewers and listeners to focus on a little bit is just how long-standing these structures are, and that Donald Trump is abusing structures that all of us should never have allowed to exist in the first place, right? There should have been bars on gerrymandering for a long time. The kind of mid-decade redistricting that we're seeing is possible because all of that was kind of just a gentleman's agreement norm of, oh, well, we're not going to do this. And there was no real legal structure preventing this mid-decade redistricting. And so when you get someone in who has authoritarian tendencies, of course, they are going to throw out norms that do not actually constrain them and then be honestly able to say or make a colorable argument that most of the time, throwing out those norms is actually legal, even if it is pretty gross. The other thing that when I looked at, and again, for our viewers, this was a shadow docket opinion. This is a 3-page opinion that has to do with the stay as opposed to full briefing. That means that there's no argument in front of the Supreme Court and that instead they are deciding just off of the briefs submitted by the respective parties, is that they cited, this destabilized in this 3-page opinion about one of the most consequential kind of electoral voting law decisions that could possibly happen. This destabilized a primary. It kind of reminded me of Bush v. Gore. And once again, thinking about the ways that we have let the Supreme Court put its thumb on the scales. And that's something that I'm thinking about a lot because when I was in law school, which was not very long ago, I graduated in 2022. So I was there from 2019 until 2022. And I had professors that would tell me if I raised, the Supreme Court feels pretty partisan. And I think the average person thinks that the Supreme Court is a political body at this point, would just smack that down and say, well, that's not true. That's not what's going to happen. These jurists really care about the law and legal norms and everything else. When in reality, you had Scalia and Clarence Thomas and Alito for the whole time that you and I have been alive, really in the background, creating the pathways necessary for these eventual opinions to come out or non-opinions to come out on the shadow docket and totally change the structure of our elections. And I think that all of that is just worth thinking about because I think that we are past the point where our pre-existing structures are going to be able to walk most of this back, and we're going to have to think really creatively. We need to get comfortable with the idea of court packing. I really think the Democrats should have done it when they had the White House in 2020. But ultimately, this is very much something that's going to require massive turnout in the midterms. And that's going to be challenging. But as you said, that's something that Afton Bain was able to motivate. We need heavy Democratic turnout in 2026 because a double-digit margin in some of these districts might not be enough. Like, we need everybody to be out. That was the reason that Donald Trump is back in office, because 2024 was a low turnout election. And so I think that it just reminds us all of the need to show up with excitement and to back politicians that are actually exciting and good politicians. That is the last thought that I'll leave you with before I kick it back to you, is that a lot of the discourse that I heard, especially from people our age or a bit younger, about Mamdani made clear to me that for a lot of people in this country, Mamdani was the first time they had seen a Democratic national profile elected that is a good politician. And that doesn't actually have to do, I am the first to be like, it's his policies, because it was, but it's not just enough to have good policies, right? You also need people who are good at messaging. And I think that sometimes too much of his victory gets, pinned on, oh, well, he was making short form videos. That's not what good messaging is. It's being able to break those policies down for people. But I was reflecting on how long it's been since those two things have really gone together with a national profile elected with broad appeal. Because a lot of the things where people are saying, oh, Mamdani is like generational, he's like so impressive. He is. He also just happens to have good policies and also be likable. And that is necessary. And unfortunately, quite rare. A lot of the national profile electeds in the Democratic Party are not turning people out. And so to leave our viewers with not just a little optimism, but also to get in before I get the allegations of punching at the party, I want to highlight a couple of people whose messaging I think has been really spot on, who already hold national level elected office. You know, Tiara in my American Demands program is highlighting right now people that are in contested primaries that we think are exciting and have good messaging, like Dylan Blaha and Milak Kirus and Chris Robb in Philadelphia and Matt Little in Minnesota, and we'll have more people rolling out. But Summer Lee, I think I've invoked before, but I want to really, really highlight again. Summer Lee's messaging about money in politics, about the Epstein files, about affordability and quality of life, I think is spot on over and over and over again. I love Delia Ramirez, who is a Chicago area elected official, who is a former community organizer. I wish she'd gotten in the Senate race, frankly, but she's pretty new to federal elected office. And so I wasn't surprised that she didn't. And then, of course, there's lots of other people who I consider like old reliables on messaging. Ilhan Omar has been one of my favorite elected officials ever for a very long time. All of our Ayanna Presleys, all of our kind of squad members in this way have been going to bat over and over to build out structures at the federal level where people like our American Demands candidates can really plug in. And so let me summarize it, which I should do at the beginning. Turnout election. No matter what happens with these maps, turnout election and the need to elect Democrats who are willing to go in and radically transform things to make them better instead of holding the line or rolling back a little bit, but not everything of what Trump has done. We need really transformational leadership coming into the midterms and transformational candidates. But my pragmatic optimism I'll leave you with is that we do have them. We just have to show up for them.
Thanks, Rachel. And that is one of the most powerful things that we can leave on, because these maps are only made based on who is likely to vote, but not who is going to vote. And so the math doesn't always math. We can change the calculus. We can change, well, they're not even using calculus. They're using basic addition and subtraction. But we can change the outcomes of these maps simply by mobilizing people to register to vote, but also empowering them to see their voice as a critical piece of changing how our world works and who our works for. And so we'll leave you with that optimism, Praggies, and we hope to see you on another episode. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share Pragmatic Optimists on the Legal AF Network. Bye, Praggies.
Bye, y'all.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.